throw away the terms for a second and get to the nitty-gritty. A dangerous, uncontrolled nuking of a community. That's what we're talking about with an open burn. That's why residents in East Palestine and nearby Western Pennsylvania have as many as 100 symptoms, both physical and mental. Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup.
This is Ashley with Status Coup.
On the ground.
In Philadelphia.
Flint, Michigan. East Palestine, Ohio. Please support the leading independent news outlet on the ground.
Covering what the corporate media covers up.
Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup. Remember the hit show, How to Get Away with Murder? Well, what I'm about to show you is literally how corporate America, with the U.S. government's complicity, has got away with murder in East Palestine, Ohio, and soon parts of Western Pennsylvania. I beg of you to watch this entire video. It will shock your conscience. First, I want to show you just an image, because this is really, after all, what this is all about. This is Zane, a 9-year-old boy, on July 30th. That's his bloody nose. He lived in East Palestine when Norfolk Southern blew up 5 tanker cars of toxic vinyl chloride, which causes many different forms of cancer. And over 2 years later, many children, adults, have been having bloody noses, dizziness, nausea, seizures, strokes, cancer now, among a long list that is hovering around 100 other symptoms. Children are also having preemptive menstrual cycles in young girls and preemptive puberty in boys. I remind you of this because obviously there's a lot of crises going on in America, but we can't forget about an actual American town being poisoned by a corporation and the government helping that corporation cover it up and no one being held accountable. Because on the internet, sometimes government agencies kind of bury important documents that journalists don't look for or are hard to find. The other day, I found an important document that kind of contradicts, actually definitely contradicts, everything the EPA and Norfolk Southern have been saying for over 2 years about what they did to the people of East Palestine, Western Pennsylvania, and likely well beyond that, because toxicologists have found the toxic plume of 1.1 million pounds of cancer-causing vinyl chloride traveled as far as 8 states, including Canada. I'm going to read parts of the Substack piece I did on this. We'll put the link in the description. Definitely sign up for our Substack. It's free. EPA letter to Norfolk Southern admits it allowed railroad to conduct illegal open burn of toxic chemicals over East Palestine. 4 days after the catastrophic chemical detonation of 5 Norfolk Southern rail tankers filled with 1.1 million pounds of toxic vinyl chloride over East Palestine, Ohio, an EPA official wrote to Norfolk Southern, drastically contradicting the claims Norfolk Southern and the EPA have made for over 2 years about the safety and legality of the chemical detonation. In a February 10th, 2023 letter authored by Jason L. Zine, an EPA manager in the Emergency Response Branch, L. Zine notified the railroad giant of its liability for what the EPA official labeled, quote, the open burn off of vinyl chloride. Let me show you the actual document here. Based on the information collected during and following the incident that occurred on February 3rd, 2023, EPA believes that Norfolk Southern may be liable under Section 107 of CERCLA with respect to the East Palestine train derailment. And if you go down here under the bulleted items, the EPA official, a top official in the Emergency Response Branch, writes, areas of contaminated soil and free liquids were observed and potentially covered and or filled during reconstruction of the rail line, including portions of the trench burn pit that was used for the open burn off of vinyl chloride. Now, why is that important? The terms open burn off. Because that, which was written by an EPA official to Norfolk Southern on February 10th, 4 days after the uncontrolled chemical detonation of cancerous chemicals over East Palestine was in direct contradiction to the lie that Norfolk Southern and the EPA started telling the residents of East Palestine 24 hours after they basically nuked the community. Let me show you. This is from the top EPA official on the ground in East Palestine on February 7th. So 24 hours after they detonated the vinyl chloride over East Palestine. This is EPA official James Justice. Let's take a listen to what he had to say, echoing Norfolk Southern's lies about what was done and how it was done.
Yes, we have been air monitoring throughout the incident, and after the operation that took place by Norfolk Southern last night with the controlled burn, we've been able to safely move our crews largely within, as Peggy indicates, so we've been focusing largely on the air quality within that 1 mile evacuation zone. We've been doing that throughout the day and throughout the night, and we're going to process that data and give our recommendation to the incident commander in the morning.
So that is February 7th, 24 hours after they nuked East Palestine and parts of Western Pennsylvania, which is sickening people. Even worse now, over 2 years later, despite claims by the EPA, Norfolk Southern, CDC, nothing to see here. I can tell you because I'm the one talking to the residents, some of whom now have terminal cancer diagnoses. 3 days after, 3 days after that, 3 days after that, I remind you, this EPA official wrote to Norfolk Southern stating open burn-off of vinyl chloride. Open burn-off. Why is that important? Because the open burn-off and open burning of hazardous waste has been prohibited by the EPA dating back to the 1980s. It's against regulations. It's illegal. Hence why they lied and said it was a controlled burn. And in layman's terms, what is an open burn? An uncontrolled detonation of cancerous chemicals right over a community, jeopardizing the public health. And don't just take it from this letter that I found that was public, but was just buried on their website. It had never been reported. Take it from one of the EPA's other officials who we caught on tape in 2023 acknowledging this. This is Mark Durno, who was the EPA's on-scene coordinator for a long time in East Palestine. Residents recorded him several times. Take a listen when they challenged him on whether or not this was an open burn, which again is against EPA regulations. It's illegal. Listen to this. Twist yourself into a pretzel logic answer from Mr. Durno back in 2023, which the majority of the mainstream media did not cover.
So, you know how last week I brought up the thing about that being an open burn? And you said that it was?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could, yeah, so what I said was, yes, you can consider that an open burn.
Okay.
Right? No, but in an emergency situation, it is what it is.
Then I printed this out from I don't know where it's from. But it had said, like, you can't do open burns at, like, sunset, or they have to be out by sunset.
Okay.
So, like, that happened about an hour before sunset. Well, that's when it got dark at my house.
That's right. No, it did. It happened. It was still burning at sunset. That's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
And then when there's a temperature inversion, does that mean that kind of inversion that happened?
So, interesting thing about the inversion. So, first of all, you're right. You know, all the open burn regulations would apply, but in an emergency situation,
Okay.
you know, there are a lot of things that we do. We're actually exempt. If we were doing that work, we're actually exempt from those types of regulations because it's an emergency. Right?
Okay.
Now, the company's not necessarily. So there could be significant fines and penalties levied based on their actions.
Was it?
So that is the EPA's top on-scene coordinator, no longer. I think he resigned from the EPA or was pushed out a couple weeks ago. I don't know the whole story. He was also the EPA's top cleanup guy in Flint who lied to the people of Flint, but that's a different story. He is acknowledging this was an open burn, which, let's throw away the terms for a second and get to the nitty gritty. A dangerous, uncontrolled nuking of a community. Nuking a chemical mushroom cloud of toxic cancer-causing chemicals, not just vinyl chloride. Toxicologists have analyzed this and said there is as many as 120 chemicals that were created through the combustion of the vinyl chloride and other things linked to cancer. That's what we're talking about with an open burn. That's why residents in East Palestine and nearby Western Pennsylvania have as many as 100 symptoms, both physical and mental, physical and cognitive. And this guy's saying, well, you know, the EPA doesn't have to follow its own regulations because it's an emergency. But the company would have to. The EPA doesn't have to follow its own regulations in the case of an emergency. Well, let's see. Let me read the EPA's regulation to you, and let's see if it says we're exempt from our own regulations. This is the EPA's regulation. In 1980, EPA prohibited open burn, open detonation of hazardous waste due to the potential risks to human health and the environment. EPA allowed one exception for open burn, open detonation to treat waste explosives with no safe mode of treatment. In 2019, EPA and National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine published separate reports that document safe alternatives are available for managing many waste explosives. This memorandum responds to questions on how to apply the existing requirements. Under the existing requirements, open burn facilities must, bold, underlined, evaluate and reevaluate whether safe alternatives technologies are available to treat their waste explosives. Where safe alternatives are available, facilities must use those alternatives in lieu of an open burn. EPA acknowledges that open burn will still be needed to treat waste explosives that do not yet have other safe modes of treatment. EPA acknowledges that implementation may be complex. EPA encourages communication among EPA, states, territories, tribes, and local communities. Okay. I don't see anything about the EPA being exempt from their own regulations, but the key term here seems to be unless. You can't do this unless there is no safer alternative. Well, let's take a look. Was there a safer alternative? This is then Senator J.D. Vance said at hearing with the National Transportation Safety Board chair. Let's take a listen. Was there safer alternatives for Norfolk Southern?
I won't ask you to speak to motivations here, but when you have an unnecessary, uncontrolled burn that poisoned a lot of people, that then led to rapid transit of train traffic, a lot of people, including me, are wondering, did they do this not because it was necessary, but because it allowed them to move traffic and freight more quickly? And if so, that is an extraordinary thing that I think requires a lot of further work from this committee and from others. But we will stop there because I see my time is up. Thank you, Chair Hamady.
May I add something to that?
Please.
Senator, it's even, I would say the factual information in our docket shows that oxyvinyls was on scene and providing information to Norfolk Southern and their contractors on the 4th, 5th, and 6th. They informed them that polymerization, they believed polymerization was not occurring and there was no justification to do a vent and burn. Rightfully, Norfolk Southern's contractors said, ruled out hot tapping and transloading because it would have been a potential safety issue for their employees, but there was another option, let it cool down. It was cooling down. We know for a fact that when that pressure relief device went off, that it had to have been above 185 degrees. Later, much later, over the course of 22 hours, that tank car was cooling, not to mention the other 4 tank cars that were only between 64 and 69 degrees. So oxyvinyls was on scene providing information to Norfolk Southern's contractor, who was in the room when the decision was made, and when advice was given to the governor of Ohio, to the incident commander. They were not given full information because no one was told oxyvinyl was on scene. They were left out of the room. The incident commander didn't even know they existed.
EPA regulations, you cannot conduct an open burn of hazardous waste unless there are no safer alternatives. Well, the owner of the chemicals that were blown up, Oxyvinyls manufactured the vinyl chloride, was on scene, and as their CEO testified, repeatedly said Oxyvinyls repeatedly advised Norfolk Southern the car temperatures are cooling. There is no urgent threat that the cars are going to explode, which is what Norfolk Southern claimed. Repeatedly, the experts who know the chemicals, because they created them, they manufactured them, advised Norfolk Southern, do not do this. Norfolk Southern locked them out of the room. They were not in the room for emergency discussions. And the governor of both Ohio and Pennsylvania, when they were advised by Norfolk Southern, we have no choice but to do a vent and burn, they were not informed that the chemical car manufacturer was on scene and advising against it. Sounds like there was a safer alternative. What do you think? Why does all this matter? Because literally, the EPA, Norfolk Southern, to this day, continue to lie to the public, in my view, criminally, that this was done in a controlled burn. Our testing shows everything is fine. Norfolk Southern's testing, EPA's testing, despite the fact, literally, independent testers, every independent tester, have detected elevated levels of vinyl chloride, formaldehyde, and other dangerous chemicals, including dioxins. Yet, there's no criminal investigation, there's no criminal charges, and there was a $600 million settlement, which really, after the lawyers are paid, is $400 million for East Palestine residents, in large part based on the lies fed by East Palestine and Norfolk, fed by EPA and Norfolk Southern. So I reached out to Norfolk Southern. Very simple question. Can you explain the contradiction between what you are publicly telling, what you're telling the public, that we did a controlled burn, and what the EPA official wrote to you in a letter admitting it was an open burn? This was the closest thing you will ever see to a corporation essentially telling a journalist without saying it, too bad, we got away with it. Norfolk Southern responded to me, good afternoon. Thank you for reaching out. The latest updates related to East Palestine can be found on our website at Making It Right East Palestine. Have a great day. Norfolk Southern Media Relations. That was their response to my direct question on, hey, can you explain the contradiction here? Because seems that based on the EPA's own letter to you, they got you dead to rights. The EPA was even worse. Their response, literally a day after I reached out to them, this was on August 19th, 2 days ago, we've received your inquiry, working on a response. As of this recording, still waiting on that response from the EPA. Not sure why it would take 4 days to respond to, why have you been lying to the public for over 2 years? Residents are getting sicker by the day in East Palestine and Western Pennsylvania, and not a damn thing is really being done about it. And this is not just an East Palestine, Western Pennsylvania thing. Similar disasters and cover-ups are happening all over the country. It's not if, it's just when it comes to your town next.